So are you still trying to wrap your head around if you want to start breeding bearded dragons or not? What's up, everyone? So in today's video, I actually want to talk about 10 things you need to know before you start breeding bearded dragons. So I actually want to split this video into halves. The first half is going to be about 5 things you need to know in general, and then there's going to be 5 things you need to know that you should not be doing when you're breeding bearded dragons. So let's get started. Hopefully you learned something today. Let's go. Before I start telling you about the 10 things you need to know, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything I put out in the future. And if you haven't already, watch my previous videos. Hopefully I catch you in time before you start buying bearded dragons. Hopefully you're doing your preliminary research before you start breeding bearded dragons. And this is one of the videos that you have found in your research. So the first thing you need to do before you start deciding if you want to start breeding bearded dragons is decide what genes you want to breed for. So obviously there's a lot of things you can decide for, whether it be just hypo, hypo-trans, breeding for leatherbacks, breeding for dunners, breeding for zeros, weros, wiblets. All of that could determine what bearded dragons you need to buy first. The second thing you need to know is what age are your bearded dragons allowed to start breeding at? Should you buy babies or should you buy adult bearded dragons? Obviously, your budget will dictate that a lot because babies are going to be cheaper than adult bearded dragons will be. Also, if you get proven breeders, they're going to be a little bit more expensive as well. So if you're going to go for a baby, usually you do not want to start breeding your bearded dragons. For males, you need to be at least 300 grams, 250 grams is what some people would say. 300 grams is what you should be shooting for. On average is 300 grams. I personally prefer 300 to 350 grams for males. And then as far as females have to be bigger because they're the ones doing the most work. They're the ones carrying the eggs. So females should be around 400 grams before you start breeding them. The bigger the better with females. Obviously, you don't want fat females. You don't want fat bearded dragons in general. But when you're breeding, the heavier the animal, obviously healthy weight, not fat weight, the better. Size matters when you're looking for a breeder female. Obviously, this girl, she is a little too small to be breeding, while this girl is a perfect size. She's about 30 grams, while this girl is only about 220 grams. So obviously, she is too small for you to breed. Now, this is just an example. Obviously, he would be too small to breed. He's not even nowhere near ready. Would he be able to try? I mean, they can try at any age as long as they think they're ready, but they will not be able to actually breed. The third thing you need to know is about adequate spacing. Each bearded dragon's enclosures needs to be at a minimum, in my opinion, 3 feet wide, 24 inches deep, and 18 inches tall, which is bigger than a 40-gallon tank, which is what the minimum size is, which I think that's torture in general. If you have more space, I would go for 4 foot wide, 24 inches deep, and 18 inches tall. If you want to go for the 24 inches tall, that's fine. There's not really much benefit because you're actually putting them further away from the UVB bulb, and unless you have structures for them to climb on, they're not going to get enough UVB from the UVB bulb you have that's 24 inches from the bottom of the enclosure. So in my opinion, 18 inches tall if you don't have a lot of climbing structures, 24 inches tall if you do have a lot of climbing structures. Besides the fact that the adults will need to be in those enclosures, you're also going to have to have space for the babies. The babies, if you're going enclosures, you're going to have several enclosures. Most people will put them in 20-gallon tanks, 20-gallon long tanks. Again, the shorter the better because they are needing to get their UVB raised. So 20-gallon long tanks, usually you can put 5 babies in each 20-gallon long. You can try to push it to 10. I don't suggest it because you're going to end up with a lot of nips. And that's a completely different topic altogether. I'll make a video separate from this on how to prevent nips on your baby bearded dragons. As far as tubs go, you can go for a 3 foot wide stainless steel rack that has probably like 4 tiers. Usually you can fit about, depending on the tubs you're using, you can probably fit about 6 or 8 tubs on that, and each tub can have about 5 babies in there, depending on how big the tubs go. Obviously, those 3 foot wide 4 tier racks, they're about 1 foot deep, so the tubs are going to be hanging on each side. And that could also stress out babies that can see any babies below them or see any other babies above them. So you're going to have to figure out a way to have like a floor in each tub for them not to be able to see each other, and also a wall that separates each tub that's next to each other. So if you're looking at adequate spacing, you're going to need, at least for one breeding pair, you're going to need 2 enclosures that are 3 foot wide, 24 inches deep, 18 inches tall at a minimum, 4 foot wide, 24 inches deep, 24 inches tall at a maximum. And then for the baby rack, if you're looking at getting several enclosures, you're just going to figure out how you can put a bunch of 20-gallon long tanks everywhere. If you're going for the rack style, those 3 foot wide racks are not going to take up a lot of space, so you just have to figure out where you can fit at least 3 foot wide, and it'll probably be about 18 inches deep whenever you put the tubs in there. So you just have to figure where you're going to put that, and then that's all you have to figure out as far as adequate spacing. That rack should be able to hold at least 40 babies, which gives you about 2 clutches from that one pairing. Unless your female lays really big clutches, then you're going to have to find a different rack system, or maybe go for a 4 foot wide with more tiers, or maybe get 2 different 3 foot wide racks. That's really up to you, and depending on how much space you have. Number 4, calcium. So calcium is obviously a nutrition that they need regardless if they're breeding or not. But female bearded dragons, when they create eggs, they use all of the calcium buildup they have stored. And if they have not stored enough calcium, they will take away from their own nutrition to provide calcium for those babies. Therefore, if you do not provide enough calcium for your female bearded dragon, your female bearded dragon is going to actually have issues after she lays her eggs, whether it be a calcium deficiency, or maybe she goes to severe calcium deficiency and maybe even has metabolic bone disease. Either way, provide enough calcium and hopefully you won't have those issues, but it's always a risk you're willing to take. Number 5 is that bearded dragons are pretty aggressive breeders. So therefore, you're probably going to have bites, and you're probably going to have gashes, and maybe even nip tails, nip toes, because technically when they're breeding, if the female's not receptive, you're also going to have fighting that occurs. Yes, female bearded dragons will fight back, so you have to be taking that into consideration when you want to breed. I personally have never had any nip tails or any nip toes, but I have had gashes on the female's tails from the males trying to show dominance. So obviously, if it's a deep gash, you're gonna have to take it to the vet because you don't want it to get infected. But if it's a superficial gash, or if it's just a scratch, it's not gonna be that bad. You can probably treat it at home with some Neosporin or something like that. And if you can't, there are medications for bearded dragons as far as cuts and stuff. But Neosporin usually works pretty good, and also Aquaphor, if you never use that, it's pretty good as well. Now let's talk about the 5 things you should not do when breeding bearded dragons. Number 1 in the 5 things you should not do is do not breed any unethical pairings. So what that means is you do not do translucent to translucent. You do not do 0 to 0, 0 to het 0, wiblets to het wiblets, leatherback to leatherback, dunner to dunner. Even though I've already made videos about this, talking about certain things you should not be doing in my genetics videos, I figured putting it in this video would be better because it's probably one place for everything. So do not do any unethical pairings. Some people will say, oh, someone requested that I do a silky pairing. It doesn't matter if somebody requested that you do a silky pairing. You do not want to create more harm to the reptile community. You also do not want to create an animal that someone's going to have to do a lot of work as far as upkeep, because silkies do take a lot of care, and most people do not want to breed for silkies because of how much care they have, and the fact that some of them do not even make it to adulthood because of how hard they are to care for. So do you want to be a breeder that produces something that's possibly going to not live to the year mark or to the 2-year mark? No, you don't want to be that person. And that's also the other thing about unethical pairings. Most of those trans to trans, or 0 to 0, or 0 to het zeros, yes, they may produce healthy babies, but that second generation of those pairings is not going to be healthy. If you produce a 0 to het 0 and you make a het 0 or a visual 0, their offsprings of those offsprings are not going to be healthy babies. So if I decide I'm going to create zeros and I decide I'm going to breed 0 to het 0, yes, my zeros may be healthy, but if the person that I sell that 0 to, they breed in the future, their babies are probably not going to make it because they are coming from a line of unethical pairings. And you don't want to be the one that produces unethical pairings that diminish the bearded dragon line. This girl is a leatherback het wiro, hypo het trans het wiro. You would not want to pair her with this male, which happens to be a hypo wiro, possible het trans. So you may make some wiros. There's a high chance you'll make some wiros, but this is definitely an unethical pairing. This right here would be the most unethical pairing that you could possibly do. This is a leatherback dunner. This is a leatherback Dunner, and they are both hypotrans. So you cannot breed trans to trans. You cannot breed leatherback to leatherback. You cannot breed Dunner to Dunner. So yes, this would be a very unethical pairing. You may think, oh wow, I'm gonna make some beautiful Weblets. Well, this is also an unethical pairing. This is a hypo leatherback Weblets. This is a hypo het trans het Weblets. You cannot breed visual Weblets to het Weblets. That's also unethical. Now here are two red females I have. I would not be pairing this female to a translucent, but this female could be paired to a translucent because she is het trans, she is not visual trans, and this girl here is a visual translucent. So number 2 goes without saying. Obviously, I talked about in the first 5 things. Make sure that you do not breed small bearded dragons. They may breed because they may be ready, but they may also, as far as females go, they may not be ready as far as weight, and you could or not be ready as far as nutrition, and you could also lead them to their death just by pairing them. And you don't want to kill your bearded dragon just to make a few bucks. Number 3, this goes for bearded dragon babies. When you are ready to sell your bearded dragon babies, do not sell them right out of the eggs. Do not sell them as soon as they start eating. They need to have at least a couple sheds before you start selling your baby bearded dragons. Why, you may be asking? Just because a dragon is eating, just because a dragon has shed, does not mean that dragon is healthy. It could be 3 sheds from now, you realize that that dragon is stunted and it's a dwarf dragon and it's not growing. You do not know until you know. So you won't know until it's been 4 or 5 sheds and that dragon is no longer growing. I actually had a bearded dragon that got up to 3 sheds. It got up to like 15 grams. I sold it, and then like 6 months later, somebody messaged me saying, hey, that bearded dragon never grew, and it died. And I said, that sounds so weird because it was growing with me, and then I shipped it to you, and all of a sudden it's not growing. Obviously, that makes me skeptical as a seller, but that also makes a buyer skeptical of me. What am I producing? Am I producing ethical things? Obviously, there's not only so much you can do as far as creating healthy babies, because out of all the babies you're creating, there's obviously going to be 1 or 2 that's always going to be unhealthy, and there's only so much you can do about that, because that's how it works when you're producing these numbers of babies per clutch. I mean, you're having 20, 30 babies per clutch. There's always going to be a chance that one of the babies does not come out healthy. Number 4, you want to make sure you are keeping track of your bearded dragon's lineage. The reason you want to do this is because you do not want to breed related bearded dragons. This may be something that you're probably like, oh, why would I do that anyways? It's done. People do it all the time. People breed cousin bearded dragons. People breed siblings. People breed offspring back to parents. It happens all the time. They call it line breeding. It's really just called inbreeding, and there's obviously issues that can come from that. So do not do it. Don't breed like that. Don't do inbreeding. Don't do line breeding. It's not something that you should be doing because of how many bearded dragon breeders there are out there. You should be able to find one dragon that is unrelated from yours. So that is something that you need to do as far as a buyer. Make sure you're checking lineage. If they cannot provide you lineage, maybe go to someone who can. I provide lineage to my customers all the way to the grandparents. And if they want to figure out what the grandparents' lineage was, they can contact the breeder of that grandparent and figure out if they can get any information from that breeder. So I provide you my lineage all the way up to the grandparents. So maybe try to find someone that does that as well. And number 5, last but not least, do not breed pet store dragons. If you got your dragon at a pet store and you have no idea what it is, do not breed it. If you got your dragon at a pet store and you have no idea what it was when you got it, and now you do because you've done research, don't breed it. Pet stores are not selling you healthy bearded dragons. They're not selling you ethical offspring, so there's no way of you knowing if your bearded dragon is going to produce healthy babies. There's no way of you knowing if your bearded dragon is related to your other bearded dragon. Because you're getting it from a pet store, you don't know anything. The pet store doesn't know anything. The only thing you should be doing when you're breeding is making sure you're checking lineage and making sure you're getting it from a reputable breeder who's not doing inbreeding or line breeding. That is what you should be doing as a breeder. That's what you should be doing before you buy any bearded dragons for the purpose of breeding. That's a little ranty, I know, but that's just, I feel really strongly about that because there's a lot of people out there that go to pet stores and get their little bearded dragons and they're like, oh, look, I have a bearded dragon. Can you tell me what it is? I want to breed it in the future. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Please. If you made it this far into the video, I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you're getting closer to deciding if you want to start breeding bearded dragons or not. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything I put out in the future. Peace.